It's May 10th, 2022. I have to ask myself, at what point do you say, and to whom do you report you think your area's under attack or in an invasion of some point? Honestly. I have an honest conversation with myself. I went to England. I went to Ireland. I look like both. Kind of, sort of, in a not really way. Close enough, though, for kindred. I then came back to New York. I looked around what's laying around the house, being Lynn and Lou. They look close enough. Then I look out on the street, and I'm like, they call this place New England, yet it looks like other places and other sounds I've heard, and other glyph systems. It's not feeling like Midwestern dairy farmer, whatever that was about. So I'm like, right, where do you flag? And So, then I'm thinking, all right, what is this invasive species speaking of? Since now I'm an endangered species on my own list, in gardening, whatever, I don't want to become a hybrid. I like being whatever flower I was born with no label. I don't want to be changed and mutated. So I am looking for signs and clues in the field, and I am like, All right, so I see at a table on this broadcast. Now, what's interesting is they just, on Hofstra campus, last time I saw Heaven, or a representative from Heaven, Valhalla, whatever, in a Christian textbook, it says Heaven and Hell. So I live in Hell. It's called New York for modern placement. I'm in the Big Apple, and it has a New England, it was supposed to have a New England feel, but it is like a Big Apple turnover at this point, it feels, and it's not tasty whatsoever. So, with that being said, I'm like, that's interesting. I'm looking to see what's at the table and what they're talking about this morning on the broadcast, because at Hofstra, they opened an Eyewitness News Bureau, Channel 7, and they had their reporting symbol as a letter in the 26 glyph system that I was taught in the New York school system, which I'm pretty sure the lower 48 also writes in. And that is their only set of glyphs that they were given, is a 26 set to stay whatever, safe. So in that 26, there's a letter. We say it's a W. And then I looked at a channel guide, and they got this receiver tuner thing, because I just go by the Jason Bourne calendar. It says Jason, and then it says DJ AM FM for radio signals, and then a J. That's literally June. You start on June, not January. July. You start in July. July, August, September, October. You go all the way through. You get an AM and an FM. But yet the TV's working off of a letter also in my 26 set of glyphs, which is interesting because it's the first time I noticed it. I happen to be of Queens, born Nicole of Queens. So I'm like, that's interesting. How does that relate? And then I'm looking to see what's using this system of the Bureau of a W sending signals to my Nicole of Queens Q AM FM radio signal, whatever. And I'm like, now why are they getting seats at the table? They look like pals. Just saying. And the pals are sitting in New York talking about plague, disease, and the one person who claims to be some authority at the table, like an educated authority, is speaking about as an infectious disease specialist. I'm like, so she bioengineers disease and then works for a pharmaceutical company to sell a cure to the innocent people of New York and New England and the territory I live within. Is that what her crime is? Because she's at the table, I'm not. And there is some COVID going on. And she seems to be pronouncing herself as an authority of some sort. So that's confusing because I don't know who gave her authority. But she is sitting at a table with two other things I would receive as pals, not as authoritative. Especially for this area. So this is what it looks like.
Here we go again. You've heard this story before. We're seeing new indications that COVID is not over in this country.
Now, there's also this thing that the kiddos at that thing they do. I mean, like, there's the Kentucky Derby where they bet on horses, and it's a thing. I don't really know the thing. I've never been to the thing. I've never heard them speak about the thing. But they know what their thing is in, like, horse world, where they love horses, some of them more than humans. I wish I could have been in that world. Didn't work out for me. It wasn't my path, unfortunately. But I have a version of the fast talkers, but they have some educated, like, MBA degrees of idiocy that they strove for and wasted their money on. And it really is not applicable anywhere but on this TV system to try to steal money from the public or persuade the public to invest their money in things in a little line that goes up and down, and people get really mad about it. They don't know how it moves. They don't know what the driving force is. They just see this line and they get really mad, or they get really happy, and then their whole life changes, like, in seconds. It's an emotional roller coaster, but people opt in for this. Again. And that's what they call Wall Street and indices. So they have, like, their own little world that they exist in about economy and jobs and numbers that make no sense because they're not real. And they actually are not based off of any facts anywhere in the world. Just like this pal. I mean, they're on a cryptocurrency, like, stock ride of, like, wait, you're humans. Watch a line on a chart and their heart starts to race and they get really excited or they get really mad. That's how you've trained them. And then they click buttons and they think that they've either gotten more rich or they've lost money. Wow, that's their whole existence. That's really pathetic. Yeah. All right. So anyway, moving on. So here's what this looks like in the disease control category.
In this country, 24 states are reporting an increase in hospitalizations, and cases have jumped more than 50% nationwide over the last 2 weeks. Now, this comes as New York City raised its coronavirus alert level last week to medium risk, triggering a recommendation but not a requirement that people wear masks in public indoor settings. Dr. Celine Gounder is an epidemiologist who's editor-at-large for Public Health.
Now, this is the pals that Gina and George were trying to convince me. I'm like, no, I have one pal. and I took my one pal wherever I went in college as like, there's one human that exists in all of eternity, so I don't get trapped in New York. That's what it looks like. We're friendly. We never had problems with one another. Whatever. What I don't need is more pals accumulating, but here we are.
Health at Kaiser Health News and joins us now to.
And this is the other problem. She's going under the sound of Kaiser. Who's Kaiser? The only Kaiser I've ever heard of is in Germany. That is what their king system. I don't know, here are we Rex? I mean, it's a little confusing. Do we go, I mean, I can't go by king because they already ruined that and she's not. So are we going by Rex in proper Italiano, like Latin, for Lex and whatever? So there's pals at the table that are not my pals. They just keep accumulating these pals. And the kids that watched this line and went to college just so they could watch this line and have some conversation with one another that nobody really understands and it's not really factual whatsoever. They're just fed information and then they all communally agree to talk about the same numbers as if they have some kind of social agreement to make other really whatever decisions. So she's going by this word Kaiser. That's not Kaiser kindred. So I'm really confused. How is the Kaiser employing non-kindred spirits in order to wear their name and their importance out about town and about the globe? That's really frightening. I mean, this is all part of this massive global expansion problem and communication problem.
To help sort it all out for us. Good to see you again, Dr. Gounder. But I don't know anybody in this room that hasn't heard of someone who has it now, who may be in the hospital first, second time, or getting it again. What is happening? We heard that there's going to be a summer surge.
And now they've got real people giving fake advice on some radio tuner, scaring the hell out of real people who don't know where this information's coming from or what it's all about. Why are they here? And why are they on the airwaves? Who gave them that permission?
Summer surge, but it's not summer yet. Why is this happening now?
Well, a couple factors. So one, you have this, or several of these ultra super infectious Omicron subvariants that are spreading across the country that got started here in New York City, but are now spreading elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Secondly, people are just tired. They're not masking. They're not social distancing. They're not.
She says nothing. Nothing. Why is she on TV saying nothing? A factual basis to the people looking for answers that need to have an efficient day so they can go about their life and actually live rather than having to hide in a room looking for information as to what the hell went wrong over the last 20 to 40 to 70 years.
They're not doing the things they did earlier in the pandemic. And so, of course, the virus doesn't really care what we think. Right. It's going to spread.
Are the people who are getting it...
Now, virus, is that the sixth disease? Is that the sixth study? Which one is it? I'm a little bit curious. Now, this is something I've never heard before. A journalist killed in something they're referring to as the West Bank. Again, in this Apple turnover in New York, they don't really speak of other areas other than what I've been referencing for whatever reason. But I noticed the same pal that's at the table with Gayle King is also, I mean, it says press on it, but it's flying. I mean, it has a reporting station now. It's flying all over the place. It's now got agreement, and see, here's the thing. If you have large, big pharma that's taking blood samples, because New York's hospital system is a mess, and there are pals here collecting tissue samples, blood samples, and whatnot. You don't know what labs they're sending them to, and then what person on a computer is breaking into those labs, stealing the quantified data, and then putting it into bioengineered pharmaceutical possibility to break genetics, to make disease, to then try to have the counterintuitive, to then sell them the cure, and so on and so forth. So now how do my children circumnavigate this broken world that they did not enter into freely? I did not either. I would have put everybody back where they belong and said, no, you have no ability to fly or move around the cabin because it just causes massive trouble. But instead they gave them microphones, press passes, free airlines, free hotel stays, and moved them assignments all over the place. So this way, now they have journalists working, confirming the status results of all these bioterroristic groups that like to break things, get their hands on tissue samples, break things, and then try to like sell you back your cure for being so stupid as to participating. So it becomes really difficult standing here like watching this unfold and going, at what area do they work on like fixing this for me and my kids so I don't get swept up in the trouble category? Like, who do you ask for help, and who actually like cares about you and your kids if you're trying to do the right thing? I'm just curious.
Reporter for the Al Jazeera network was shot and killed while covering an Israeli raid in the West Bank.
More pals?
MTS.
But I had somebody. So Maria's mother and father, Maria's stepsister, Gina, and some guy, her husband named George. They look more like this, but with dark hair. Came when I was younger to North 4th Street, where in New Hyde Park, where Maria lived, supposedly, allegedly. And they said that over my life frame, they were hoping to get along. And I'm like, what do you mean get along? And they're like, well, get along with more people like us. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I get along with Maria. Why wouldn't I? What are these adults talking about? But they actively pursued me, had me trapped in a house on a play date with a pal, and then purposely sought me out to sit on the couch and have a face-to-face interview. Now, was that a warning that they were planning on invading America in some quiet way? Because, at age 8 or 9, or not even, be more like 6 or 7, how was I to know that that's what they meant? And what authority would I go to speak to about this?
Tayab is tracking the latest developments for us from London. Imtiaz, it's always sad when a journalist...
And now what frightens me is in where Elizabeth lives in London, this is what's calling itself a mayor. Now, if that's where England is, because that was not in England in the 1980s. That is not a settled or an established, at any point that I was there, was that representative of the establishment or the settlement in England. Nor was it the establishment or settlement in New England. But now, all of a sudden, it's everywhere you look.
Eyes in the field. Reportedly, this journalist was wearing one of those familiar blue flak jackets that said "Press clearly." Good morning. What else do we know?
Tony, good morning. Well, what we do know is that Shireen Abu Akleh set out early this morning to cover an Israeli raid in the town of Jenin. She was, as you say, wearing a helmet and body armor that was clearly marked as press when she was shot. Now, the journalist seen here next to her said they were targeted by Israeli forces. Her employer, Al Jazeera, said the veteran reporter was, and I'm quoting here, assassinated in cold blood by Israeli forces. Now, Israel's prime minister called her death unfortunate and blamed it on armed Palestinians, claiming they were, quote, firing indiscriminately. A second journalist was shot in the back but survived. Ali al-Samoudi says Israeli soldiers shot both him and Abu Akleh. Now, the U.S. ambassador to Israel is calling for a...
None of these sounds that he makes is American. Not one.
A thorough investigation. Now, Israeli forces have carried out near daily raids in the West Bank amid a series of deadly attacks inside Israel, with Jenin a main flashpoint. Now, on a personal note, I knew Shireen, who was both Palestinian and American.
She was not American. Not North American, not on any day. In a New England sense, she was not American.
Used to work together in Jerusalem, and she was a kind and generous colleague, always looking to give voice to those who were so rarely heard from. But more than anything, she was a pioneer, a household name across the Arab world. Shireen started her career in the 90s when there were few Arab women reporting on the issues that affected their communities.
So that was early 90s. So what happened? What broke? Why was security in New England, North America, allowed to sit back and relax and cause further deterioration of North England or North America's security? I'm just curious because there are children here and there is a lot of turnover now. People went missing and disappearing. I don't know where to find help. But I see a lot of things arriving. Not just like that. All sorts of things in a PAL category. Like what was at the table this morning on the C, the BS this morning. It's really frightening. And it doesn't look like there's any help for people that look like me anymore. And that's even what's more frightening. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.